let's just break down the tank armor versus power armor difference, because we really didn't talk about that on launch week, but it's an important distinction where Necromancy has landed, in particular the tier 70 plus Deathwarden armor and the tier 70 plus Deathdealer armor, because they each have a unique special effect to them. And Thaxi, you're in the camp of feeling like the Deathwarden is actually more powerful and beneficial than the Deathdealer set.
I'm going to say they both have their place.
Yeah.
If you're doing group content, please, for the love of God and all that is holy, unless you are tanking, please be in power armor. Because otherwise, like, if you're not getting actively hit by a bunch of stuff, you're not tanking. You don't need to be tanky. You need to be doing damage. So, like, the way that the scales were before, right? They made 2 sets of armor and they said, all right, on the one set, and please don't quote me on the exact numbers. Somebody knows these better than I do, and I apologize. They're not off the top of my head. Damage armor is going to do 10 to 20%-ish more damage than you'd expect otherwise at the cost of 5 armor tiers. The tank armor is going to have those extra 5 armor tiers worth of like armor value, typically. Depends on the style, but typically. And it's going to have, once you hit level 70 for most styles, most armors, you're going to have a health bonus attached to it. The health bonus obviously makes you more tanky, and it comes with some extra damage mitigation in PvE that we don't normally talk about, but it's there. So tank armor, like, the thing is, in RuneScape, the way that the game is balanced, we deal oftentimes much more than 10 times the damage we receive, which says that a 10% like, the damage side of things, the damage we output is so much bigger than the damage we have to tank effectively that buffing our output a little bit is generally more effective than buffing the damage that's incoming. So while it may have been a choice of like 10 to 20% extra damage versus 10 to 20% extra tankiness, the damage side won really, really, really hard on those scales for a long time. If you were trying to be sweaty about your setup, right? Obviously being more tanky, there's a time and place for it, and it was used. But and obviously they've upped that 10 to 20% tankiness incredibly with things like Crypt Bloom and like Darkness, right? To like add these extra effects, or like the Octo armor set where you get a little bit of tankiness and a little bit of extra damage put in. With that said, what they did with the Necromancy armors is they said, nah, screw that. We're going to give a passive 10% chance to not get hit. So just straight up extra 10% damage mitigation. And we're not just going to give you like 10 to 20% extra health. We're going to give you like 50% extra health. Like, they chunked into that side of the scales, and the armor, especially like we're saying with the Ghost up, with the Darkness Invocation up, like, or Incantation, you get so tanky, so incredibly tanky. You can do a lot of things that, like, that 10 to 20% extra damage from power armor, sure, but like if wearing the tank armor allows you to use an aggression potion at a really high damage monster for like Slayer, your Slayer has become more efficient in the tank armor. And now there's, again, with before Necromancy for the other styles, it's a pretty cut and dry. You probably want to be doing this thing, right? And part of that is because they're solved, and part of it because mathematically that thing is just way better. In Necromancy, they did a much better job of, in my opinion, of balancing to say, hey, you've got a choice to make here. And it might make more sense to do either of these things situationally.
Yeah.
And that's what they did with the armor, in my opinion. And I think it's really smart, and I think it's worked out really well. And I would love to see that translated to the other styles as well. As that's the other big, we're talking about systemic changes in the crits and accuracy and stuff. That's the thing that with this is like that tankiness on the tank armor is not to be discounted.
And that's the interesting thing about this is that I was at level 60 with the tank armor. I was like, holy cow, this is really upping my life points more than even, more than tier 80 plus tank armor does with any of the other styles. Plus, you got this dodge chance
scales hard
associated with it. And
starting at tier 70.
It makes it really comfortable. And like we were just talking about in the previous segment before, with this, it's not Animate Dead Crypt Bloom levels, but it's still it's a different way of making yourself tanky, is what I'll say.
I mean, Animate Dead is effective at frequent low damage hits because it reduces them by a lot, but against big damage hits, it doesn't do as much. Darkness will mitigate a big hit and a small hit the same amount. It's just a, flat 30% less damage taken. So against something that's going to hit you really hard, like a very high level Slayer monsters or a lot of bosses, given a lot of bosses have 100% accuracy, and that kind of makes Darkness useful. They do still need to make that system change, but outside of those places, like, Darkness can outweigh it to some degree.
And isn't this also our first dodge mechanic in game? For the character,
yes.
At least? Yeah.
Yes, they added more RNG. They took away RNG on our hit chance, and they added RNG on the enemy hit chance. I mean, we've always had RNG as a hit chance element, right? To be clear, like, enemies could always miss you, but this is a second check. You've got to roll to hit, and then yes, you roll the hit twice, so to speak.
Yeah, and then, I mean, Deathdealer gives you the execution chance, 2%
which is
chance
nice,
for
not have to think about it.
Peace Ward to, apply Death Mark, and you don't need to, cast it. You can still cast it if for some reason you fail to do that over a fight, but hey.
It saves you GCD.
Yeah,
it keeps in good. Terms of the power armor, you can do damage. It's passive damage output.
And, this is something they can iterate on, I think, for other styles quite easily. And one of the things that they could just bring in is, hey, just add more distinctions between tank and power armor and do set effects again. Because these are quite honestly just set effects that they brought in with these. The death mark chance and the dodge chance for the tank side. And I remember some discussion a long time ago, people were saying, just go and add set effects to items. And they weren't sure if they were going to do that, but... Here we are now.
Well,
so.
And it's something to do with, like, does in some situations it could encourage Switchscape to some degree. Not this one though, right? Because they're passive the way that these apply. But it's the thing of, like, would you rather have a weapon that has a passive effect on it, or a weapon that has a special attack on it, or both?
Right, and that's factoring into the diversity of it again and letting people choose. So right. I think that's a net positive at the end of the day.